Hi, I'm Darla. My sister used to call me the Maid, sometimes right to my face, sometimes with a laugh in front of guests. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was realizing the house I helped build, the life I held together. She claimed it all as hers. No credit, no thank you. Just a fake smile and a forged signature. So one day, I left her the keys and a note. I walked into the dining room with a tray of glasses I'd just hand-washed, each one perfectly dried with the linen towel tucked in my apron pocket. The room smelled like roasted garlic and rosemary, and the candles Celeste insisted on lighting flickered against the freshly painted eggshell walls. I remembered the hours I spent sanding and painting that wall when we moved in. My back ached for 2 days afterward. Celeste hadn't lifted a finger back then, but now, here she was, floating around like some suburban duchess. "Put the flowers on the side table, not the buffet. It blocks the wine," she snapped at me as she flitted past in her overpriced heels. I bit my lip and nodded. I'd spent the whole day chopping, stirring, cleaning, quietly making everything look effortless while Celeste played hostess. This dinner was her big show for Vernon, her new boyfriend. The house? The one we technically co-owned? Tonight it was being staged as her castle. When Vernon walked in, tall, too tanned for October, cologne first, personality second, he gave me a passing glance and offered a half-smile, clearly unsure of who I was. Celeste grinned like she'd been waiting for that moment. "Oh, that's just Darla, our unofficial maid. Keeps the place running." Laughter followed. Casual, careless laughter that dug its way into my chest. I smiled. I had to. But I felt my face heat up so fast I thought my ears might catch fire. My name, my worth. Reduced to a punchline over shrimp cocktail. Dinner followed in the formal dining room, the one with the antique chandelier I polished last weekend. I sat at the far end, across from a couple whose names I didn't catch, next to a woman who told me she just adored Celeste's taste in decor. She assumed I was the hired help. Somewhere between the salad and the seared duck breast, Vernon turned to Celeste and said, "So, how long has she been staying with you guys?" Celeste barely looked up from her wine. "She's kind of just been living here. You know, family stuff." I froze. Another guest laughed. "Hey, freeloaders gotta eat too, right?" It was the kind of joke that was supposed to be harmless, but it landed like a brick. I said nothing. I just wrapped my fingers around my wineglass and gripped until my knuckles turned pale. If I'd squeezed any harder, it would have shattered in my hand. I didn't finish dinner. I excused myself with a polite smile and went upstairs to my room, if I could still call it that. The door still creaked on the right hinge, just like when I moved in years ago after Mom passed. Celeste had wanted to sell the house, but I'd insisted we keep it. I handled the paperwork, paid the lawyer fees, even covered the mortgage payments when she was drowning in debt after that second bankruptcy. She'd forgotten that. Or maybe she never cared to remember. I sat on the edge of my bed, the sounds of clinking glasses and laughter echoing faintly through the floor. Then I stood, walked over to the closet, and pulled down the old plastic storage bin I hadn't opened in years. Inside, neatly labeled folders, copies of the mortgage agreement, the original deed, bank receipts, my name right there beside hers. I held up one of the wine glasses from the bin, part of a set I bought the year we moved in, the same style she used tonight, the same kind she mocked me over. My reflection stared back at me through the glass, tired but not broken. That was new. All this time I thought I was being patient, supportive, family. But tonight, something shifted. My heart didn't ache. It hardened. I wasn't going to cry about it. I was going to remember. She wanted to call me a maid? Fine. Let's see how well she does when the mortgage notices stop getting paid. By the following Tuesday, the silence between us had settled into something sharp and cold. We weren't fighting, not openly. That was never Celeste's way. She preferred little cuts that didn't bleed right away. So I stayed quiet too, but not passive. I watched, I noted, and then something new landed right on the kitchen counter, unwrapped like a gift she didn't even try to hide. I came downstairs that morning to grab my planner. The sun hit the counter just right, spotlighting a glossy magazine next to her empty coffee mug. Her lipstick left a faint mauve ring on the rim, and a faint trace of vanilla creamer lingered in the air. There she was, on the cover. My sister, beaming like she'd won a national award. The headline read, "Modern Maven: How Celeste Built Her Dream Home After Divorce." I froze mid-step, then slowly reached for the magazine, flipping through the pages with careful fingers. There it was again. Her face, our living room, even the kitchen behind her. Except, it was all hers now. According to the article, this place had been her fresh start, her post-divorce success story, her sanctuary. I wasn't mentioned, not once, not even a vague acknowledgement of shared ownership. She spoke like she'd built this house brick by brick with her bare hands. "I did it all on my own," she'd said in the interview. The journalist? Vernon's friend. I remembered him now. Ben. He'd been at dinner 2 months ago, sitting across from me, sipping Merlot, and never once asking who I was. Of course. I closed the magazine and set it down without a word. I didn't slam it. That would have given too much away. I walked through the house slowly, one room at a time. The living room. She'd replaced the old family photos with abstract art. The hallway. My college diploma, gone. The patio door. She'd moved the potted succulents I kept alive for years. And the garden I built from scratch with my bare hands, the one that had been my therapy during Mom's final months. The article credited it as Celeste's personal meditation space. I stood in the hallway a moment longer, letting the silence fill the gap between the person I thought I was in this house and the ghost she'd recast me as. "Hey," Vernon's voice pulled me from my thoughts. He strolled in wearing a navy polo and gym shorts, sipping from a protein shaker like this was some casual Sunday. "We're doing a photo shoot this weekend, for the follow-up spread. Hope you don't mind staying out of the shots. They want a clean aesthetic, you know?" I blinked once. That was all. "Sure," I said. "No problem." He didn't notice the way I didn't smile. He never did. Later that night, I sat at my desk and opened my old laptop. It still had the faded sticker from a tech conference I attended back when I was freelancing in finance consulting. A part of my life that no one in this house ever asked about. I logged into my old Google Drive. It took a second to remember the password, but then it opened, and there it was, a folder titled House Legal. Inside, a PDF copy of the deed dated 5 years ago, both our names side by side, equal owners. I double-checked the watermark, the notary stamp, the timestamp. Still valid, still binding. I printed a hard copy and slipped it into a red folder, then slid it to the back of the nightstand drawer, under some old birthday cards and a broken watch I hadn't gotten around to fixing. I didn't confront her, not yet. Celeste thrived on drama, on spectacle. She wanted reactions so she could play victim. I wasn't giving her that. Instead, I started a spreadsheet, labeled each folder, began marking dates, patterns, discrepancies. She thought she was writing the narrative alone. Let her, because I was about to take the pen back. I was updating the spreadsheet when my phone buzzed, just past midnight. I almost ignored it, thinking it was another promotional text or a spam call. But when I glanced at the screen, I froze. "Mila, thought you might want to see this. Sorry, I had no idea it was like this now." Attached was a screenshot, a group chat. Celeste's name lit up in neon blue at the top of one message bubble. "She's like an emotional sponge. I swear she just absorbs everyone's energy and gives back nothing. Still hanging around like dead weight we haven't figured out how to shake yet." There were laughing emojis underneath, thumbs ups, a few so true replies. I stared at it. Mila had been my lab partner junior year. We lost touch after graduation, like most people do. I hadn't seen her in over a decade. But somehow, she'd ended up in this group with Celeste, probably through Vernon's network. She hadn't sent another message. No follow-up, no apology, just the screenshot, like she was quietly sliding a knife across the table and telling me who had held it all along. I didn't reply. I didn't cry either. I just locked my screen and set the phone face down on my desk. The thing about betrayal is, it doesn't always shout. Sometimes it arrives on tiptoe, wrapped in quiet confirmation of what you were too tired to admit. The next morning, I needed to breathe somewhere that wasn't painted with her fingerprints. So I walked down to a coffee shop on Peachtree, a little brick place tucked between a vintage bookstore and a nail salon. I used to go there back when life had more curiosity than survival in it. I stood in line, trying to decide between a chai or a plain black coffee, when I heard someone say my name. Darla? I turned and saw Caleb. Caleb. It had been, 8, 9 years? He looked older. Fuller beard, a little gray at the temples. He was still handsome in that quiet, introspective way. Still had that half smile that made you think he was about to apologize for something, even when he hadn't done anything wrong. Wow, I said, stunned. You still come here? He nodded. Now and then. I teach a night class down the block. Good to see you, I added, genuinely meaning it. He was a soft spot I'd packed away neatly with no hard feelings. We talked for maybe 30 seconds, how he was doing, how I was still around the neighborhood, when the air shifted. Celeste's voice, loud, sharp, sweetened with artificial charm. Well, look who finally left the house, she called out, breezing in like a gust of perfume and disdain. She didn't wait to be invited into the moment. She simply took it. Oh, Caleb, don't you love surprises? She chirped. She used to cry about you for months, you know. Like, full-on ugly sobs. I think we burned through half a tissue box a week. I heard laughter from behind her, probably Vernon, lingering at the entrance. The room went still. Caleb's smile faltered. I didn't respond. Not a word. I picked up my coffee when it came, offered Caleb a silent nod, and walked out the front door without looking back. I took the long way home, cut through Piedmont Park, let the air wash over me. I didn't need to defend myself to a memory, or let her rewrite yet another piece of my story. Back home, I went straight to my room and pulled out my journal. Not the polished one I used for lists and receipts, but the beat-up leather-bound one I hadn't touched since Mom died. I sat down, pen in hand, and instead of writing what hurt, I started a list. Birthday dinner, 2018, Celeste. Accidentally posted a photo of me mid-blink in the group chat, captioned, If despair had a face. Thanksgiving, 2019. Told everyone I was between jobs while I was actively consulting 3 clients. Baby shower, 2021. Laughed in front of our cousins when I mentioned freezing my eggs. Called me Miss Independent without the plan. I filled half a page before stopping. Then I drew a line across the bottom. Underneath it I wrote, She counts on me staying quiet. I capped the pen, closed the book. There was no flare of rage, no pounding heart. Just a steadiness in my hands I hadn't felt in a long while. A kind of readiness. Not for war, but for reclamation. Let her talk. Let her joke. I was done giving her the stage. The next morning started like any other, until it didn't. I was rinsing a cup in the kitchen sink when my phone vibrated on the counter. I dried my hands and glanced at the screen. A subject line popped up from my credit monitoring service. New inquiry, your credit was checked. I frowned. I hadn't applied for anything recently. Curious, I opened the email. Mortgage lender, hard inquiry. Under my full legal name, that was impossible. I read the message again, slowly, then once more. Same name, same address, same social security number. My hands tightened around the edge of the counter. I didn't want to jump to conclusions. But let's be honest. My instincts had already finished the race. 10 minutes later, I was pulling into the parking lot of the bank branch listed in the alert. I hadn't even changed out of my sneakers. I just grabbed my purse, phone, and keys and drove. Inside, the air conditioning blasted down like an interrogation lamp. I approached the front desk calmly, smiled, and asked to speak with someone regarding a recent mortgage inquiry tied to my name. The woman behind the desk, polite but distracted, typed a few things, asked me to wait, and then waved me toward a desk near the window. A bank manager introduced himself, Mr. Ramsey, and motioned for me to sit. He had that well-trained customer service expression, friendly but guarded, always anticipating conflict. "How can I help today?" he asked. "There was an inquiry on my credit," I said, placing my ID on the table. "I didn't initiate it. I'd like to see the documentation." He clicked around on his computer. "Ah, yes, a refinance application came through last week for the property on Glen Ridge." I nodded once. "That's my house, or half of it?" He clicked again, then turned the monitor slightly toward me. "Here's what we received." I leaned in. There it was, Celeste's name as primary applicant, mine listed as co-owner, monthly income estimates, property value, and then the signatures, hers, and mine. Except it wasn't mine. It was a lazy imitation. Too neat, too swooping. My real signature slanted, tight from years of writing checks in dim lighting. This one looked like someone had practiced it, maybe off an old lease or a birthday card. I sat very still, watching the screen. I didn't argue, didn't raise my voice. I simply asked, "Could I get a printed copy of this for my records?" "Of course," he replied quickly, already sensing something was off. When he handed over the printouts, I thanked him and stood. "Miss Monroe," he said softly before I walked out, "if you believe this is unauthorized, we can flag it internally and delay processing." I met his eyes. "Not yet, but thank you." I made it to the car before the anger set in. Not the frantic, messy kind, but the cold, clean sort. The kind that made your thoughts sharpen. The kind that made your jaw clench tight enough to leave bruises. I didn't cry, not even a blink. Instead, I sat there, gripping the steering wheel until the tension in my arms faded. Then I drove home. When I got back, I went straight to my room, opened the nightstand drawer, and added the new documents to the red folder, tucking them behind the deed and the saved receipts. I found a sticky note and scribbled, "Deed, bank record, witness." That evening, I logged into our joint utilities account and took screenshots of every payment I'd made over the last 5 years. Rent, maintenance, repairs. Her name was never on a single receipt, not once. She'd used my name to secure a better interest rate, used my signature to lock in equity, and now she was pretending I didn't even exist on paper. I wasn't a co-owner in her world. I was a shadow. I pinned the checklist to my bulletin board, then sat back and stared at it. Around 9, there was a soft knock at my bedroom door. "Hey!" Celeste's voice floated through, sugary and casual. "Just wanted to see if you're up for watching that show tonight. Vernon fell asleep early." I didn't move, didn't say a word. A pause, then footsteps retreating down the hallway. I waited until the hallway light turned off, then turned back to my laptop. I opened a new spreadsheet. Labeled it, Narrative Control, Day 1. The day of the dinner started like any other, only quieter. There was a tension in the air, like a string pulled taut. I woke up earlier than usual, not because I was excited, but because I needed space from the performance I knew was coming. Celeste was already in the kitchen, pretending to be flustered with timing. "Darla, could you handle the table settings? And maybe whip up your famous vinaigrette? You know how Aunt Noreen loves it." I nodded, but said nothing. I moved around the kitchen like I was just another part of the house. Useful, silent, expected. She barely looked at me as she gave out instructions like it was her own production. While she buzzed around adjusting platters and flapping about fresh-cut hydrangeas like they were royalty, I made sure everything looked effortless. I laid out the cloth napkins she'd forgotten in the laundry room, polished the silver she left streaked, checked the seating chart she'd hastily scribbled onto a sticky note. She was too busy perfecting her image to notice how many pieces she was borrowing from me. Guests started arriving around 6. My aunt and uncle from Tennessee, their grown daughter Lena, and a few cousins I hadn't seen since our grandmother's funeral. Vernon opened the door with his signature overcompensating charm, and Celeste played the gracious hostess as if she hadn't left me out of every conversation leading up to this dinner. I smiled, not because I wanted to, but because it helped me blend in. It bought me time. Once everyone settled with their drinks, Celeste clinked her glass with a butter knife. "Before we dig in, I just want to say how thankful I am that our family could all come together under one roof. My roof." She paused, eyes scanning the table like a performer waiting for her cue. And of course, none of this would be possible without our very own Darla, the maid who keeps the engine running. Literally. Laughter spilled out around me, the kind that people give when they don't know whether to laugh or cringe. Vernon chuckled into his glass. My cousin Lena looked down at her plate. Aunt Noreen blinked, uncomfortable, her wine glass hovering midair. I sat perfectly still, my fork balanced delicately against the rim of my plate. No smile, no rebuttal, just silence. Celeste moved on quickly, but the moment left a bitter aftertaste that clung like smoke. I excused myself not long after dessert was served and slipped upstairs. Later that night, Once the last car had pulled away and the hallway light flicked off, I opened Instagram. My eyes landed on Celeste's latest reel, already racking up comments and likes. A soft piano melody played under a montage of the evening, sparkling wine, floral arrangements, wide-angle shots of the dining room I decorated. A voiceover purred, "When you build something all on your own, every corner tells your story." I paused the video. There I was, in the background of a single shot, pouring dressing into a serving dish. A blur, a prop. No mention, no credit. Caption: "Built it from the ground up, no shortcuts, just vision." I didn't cry, I didn't rage. I simply stared at the screen until my reflection in the dark glass told me it was time to stop being a footnote. I reached for my journal, turned to a clean page and wrote, "One more time, and I make it public." Then I opened my email and began drafting a clean timeline. I attached copies of receipts, screenshots, dates of mortgage payments, photos of documents. Everything went into a new folder named Leverage. Before shutting down my laptop, I opened Celeste's reel one last time. I didn't play it again. I just read the comments. "So inspiring, Celeste. You're the definition of self-made. She really did it all on her own." I whispered to myself, "Not for long." The following morning, as I sipped lukewarm coffee from a chipped mug, a new alert pinged on my phone. Another inquiry had been made to a mortgage lender. My name was attached again, only this time the lender was different. I stared at the email. I hadn't submitted anything. No conversations, no consent. Just a new inquiry, same house, same tactic. I forwarded the message to myself, printed the PDF attachment, and laid it on the dining table. I circled my name in red and wrote a word in capital letters across the top: fraud. This wasn't a slip-up. It wasn't desperation. It was a calculated move, practiced, refined, and meant to get past me unnoticed. I didn't scream, I didn't pace. Instead, I got dressed, gathered my documents, and drove to the bank where the application had been submitted. The drive took 20 minutes. I played no music. I needed the silence to think. If I let the noise in, I'd lose the edge I'd finally built. Inside the bank, the air was over-conditioned and smelled faintly of toner and floor polish. I asked for the loan manager and presented my ID. I explained the situation in a calm, professional tone. I used words like unauthorized use, forged co-signature, and document discrepancy. I didn't beg. I didn't accuse. I reported. The woman behind the desk pulled up the digital file. Her screen tilted slightly toward me, enough for me to see the signature field. It looked more like my name this time. The curve of the D, the slant of the R. It was familiar, almost perfect, but not quite. It was too clean, too measured, like someone had practiced on a napkin until they got close enough. "I didn't sign this," I said, steady. She glanced at me, then back at the screen. "Would you like to file a formal dispute?" "Yes," I said, "and I'd like a copy of every page." She nodded, began printing. I waited, hands folded in my lap. My fingers didn't twitch. My jaw didn't clench. I just watched the papers stack in the tray like evidence in a trial. Back home, I slid the new file into the red folder, behind the first forged refinance, the deed, the utility bills. Then I moved to my laptop and opened a new tab. Voice recorder. I didn't need to yell. I needed to build a timeline no one could ignore. 3 weeks earlier, I'd started filming myself around the house, partly out of instinct, partly because I knew where this was headed. I'd placed the small camera discreetly on the bookshelf in the hallway, angled just enough to catch the living room and kitchen. The footage was unglamorous. Me unclogging the sink, sweeping up broken glass, replacing light bulbs. There were clips of me adjusting the thermostat when the power shorted, calling the plumber when the water line leaked. One clip from a rainy Tuesday afternoon showed me carrying in groceries while Vernon scrolled his phone on the couch. He didn't look up, just muttered, "She loves playing house, let her." Another showed Celeste bragging on a call. "Of course the house is mine. I mean, Darla's just around." The timestamp didn't lie. Neither did the lens. I edited the footage into short time-stamped segments, labeled them daily upkeep, verbal evidence, financial contributions. It was meticulous, maybe even obsessive, But it felt less like revenge and more like reclaiming my place in a story she was trying to rewrite without me. The next day, I called the bank and asked for a meeting with the branch manager and a notary. I walked in wearing a plain navy blouse and carried a manila envelope labeled documentation. Inside, the original deed with both our names, the forged refinance papers, screenshots of mortgage payments, all under my account, and a USB with the footage. The manager reviewed it all, nodding slowly. "This isn't a misunderstanding," he said, pressing the folder shut. "This is a documented misrepresentation." "Thank you," I said. That's all I needed to hear. When I got home, the house was quiet. Celeste and Vernon had gone to a late lunch. I didn't wait for them to come back. I placed a slim folder on the kitchen counter, right beside her curated stack of home magazines. The label read, "Just in case you forget who really owns this place." Inside were the still images from the video clips, me scrubbing floors, cooking, signing bills, and both versions of the refinance documents. Hers with the forgery, mine with the truth. I didn't add a note. I didn't threaten. She'd know what it meant. Then I returned to my room, opened my laptop, and renamed the video file, Inheritance or Invasion. The silence in the house that night wasn't peace. It was the sound of panic hiding behind a locked door. The next morning, I found the evidence folder exactly where I'd left it. But the rest of the kitchen told a different story. The dishwasher had been emptied, a fresh pot of coffee brewed. My favorite mug sat clean and waiting on the counter, handle turned toward me, just the way I like it. Celeste was trying to set a stage. Over breakfast, she offered me eggs. Scrambled, light on salt. My preference, not hers. Vernon stayed unusually quiet, eyes darting between us like a spectator unsure which team to cheer for. "Thought we could all use a reset," Celeste said softly. "Start from a better place." I looked up from my toast, nodded once, and said nothing, because I knew what this was. She wasn't sorry, she was nervous, and when Celeste got nervous, she performed. But by lunchtime, her act had worn thin. She hovered around the hallway near my door, trying to initiate small talk, offering baked goods, then advice I hadn't asked for. She was placating. That meant she was hiding something. By Thursday, I took the bus downtown to the courthouse archives. I told Vernon I had errands to run, and Celeste didn't ask, which confirmed my suspicion. They thought I was retreating. I walked into the dusty records office, past a row of humming microfilm machines, and gave the clerk the information I had. Celeste's full name, her last known filing address, her supposed clean financial record. 10 minutes later, the clerk returned with a thick manila folder. Inside, the truth. 6 years ago, Celeste had filed for Chapter 7 bankruptcy. I skimmed the details, heart pounding slower with every page. There was an old boyfriend listed as her co-signer. His name didn't ring a bell, but the paperwork showed her debts were significant. Credit cards, a repossessed car, medical collections. She'd declared no assets at the time, no mention of property, no mention of me. And that made her mortgage application a lie from the very start. I took photos with my phone. Case number, signature page, discharge date. Then I folded the paperwork back, smiled at the clerk, and thanked her. On the way home, I stopped for a smoothie, something cold, simple. I needed to sit with what I had found, not in anger, but in preparation. I now had everything: motive, history, proof. And just as I was finishing the last sip, my phone rang. It was the school. "Hi, Miss Monroe," the secretary's voice came through. "We just wanted to confirm, Kira is scheduled to leave with her Aunt Celeste today?" I nearly dropped the cup. "No, she is not," I said, standing up fast. "Do not release her. I'm 10 minutes away." I hung up before she could respond. Traffic was light, thank God. I made it to the front office in under 9. Celeste was already inside, chatting with the school staff like nothing was amiss. Kira sat near the front, backpack slung over one shoulder, clearly confused. "She told us she had temporary guardianship," the secretary said, glancing nervously at Celeste. "We were just waiting for confirmation." I pulled out my wallet, handed over the custody papers, signed, notarized, and sealed with the court's stamp. "Sole custody," I said. "No temporary, no weekend exceptions." Celeste opened her mouth to protest, but I cut her off. You show up again without my consent, I file a restraining order, and next time, I bring an officer. The room went silent. Celeste smiled thinly, all charm gone from her voice. It was just a miscommunication. Relax, Darla. I turned to the secretary. We're done here. That night, after dinner with Kira and a long, calming bedtime routine, I sat down at my desk. I emailed my attorney the bankruptcy report, attached the refinance forms, side by side, labeled each attachment clearly. There would be no confusion. Then I copied the school's call log and wrote a brief note. Attempted unauthorized pickup. Consider protective filing options. At nearly midnight, Vernon knocked on my door. He didn't wait for an invitation, just stepped inside, arms crossed like he was bracing for fallout. I didn't know she was doing that, he said. With Kira. That wasn't my idea. No one said it was, I replied evenly. But you're still here, which tells me all I need to know. Darla, she's not thinking clearly. She hasn't been for years, I said. You're welcome to keep enabling her. Just know, I'm not part of that anymore. He lingered another beat, then left without another word. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I uploaded every file into a cloud folder and changed the access to read-only. My attorney would have full access by morning. And Celeste? She started packing. Not everything. Just a suitcase, some folders, one of her makeup bags. I knew that look. She wasn't leaving. She was recalibrating. But this time I wasn't waiting around to be her collateral damage. 2 days passed without a single slam of a door or snide remark. That alone told me something was brewing. Celeste walked through the house like a guest, overly polite, mildly cheerful, eyes constantly checking me, as if trying to measure how much I knew, how far I might go. Vernon lingered on the edges, keeping his head down, muttering excuses to leave the room whenever we crossed paths. Then, one afternoon, as I was pruning dead leaves from the hydrangeas, a car I didn't recognize pulled up to the curb. An older woman stepped out, gray hair tucked beneath a pale scarf, eyes sharp behind thin-rimmed glasses. You must be Darla, she said. I nodded, brushing soil from my palms. I was a friend of your mother's, she added softly. We used to meet every week at the diner down by Riverfront. She made me promise something years ago, and I've been holding on to it, waiting for the right time. She reached into her bag and handed me a sealed envelope, the kind that turns your pulse quiet. Inside was a will, dated, notarized, original ink still crisp. It stated clearly, without ambiguity, that the house was to be left solely to me. Not shared, not split, mine. I blinked at the signature, my mother's handwriting, unmistakable. She gave this to me just before her last surgery, the woman said. Told me to deliver it if things ever got messy. I thanked her, holding the paper like it weighed more than it should. Celeste had known. She had hidden this, buried it like it was nothing more than a receipt. By early evening, I was sitting across from my attorney, the will spread across his glass-topped desk. He adjusted his reading glasses, eyes scanning the lines twice before nodding slowly. This trumps everything, he said. You ready to do this? I nodded. I've been ready for a while. The next day, Vernon texted me, said he wanted to talk. We met at a cafe downtown, the kind with reclaimed wood tables and coffee served in mason jars. He didn't order anything, just sat down, eyes bloodshot, and sighed like someone about to bleed truth. I didn't know how deep it went, he said. At first, she just asked me to clean up the narrative. Told me to say I helped buy the house, that I managed finances, but I didn't. He rubbed his hands together like they itched. She didn't even open the bills. You did all of it. She just told stories online. I thought it was harmless at first, but you built that life, Darla, not her. I didn't offer comfort, didn't forgive. I simply said, I know. Then I stood, gathered my purse, and left him there, staring at the untouched coffee. The legal motion was filed within 24 hours. I submitted the original will, the forgery evidence, the refinance fraud, the custody stunt, all of it. Celeste was served papers in a quiet envelope slid under her door. 30 days to vacate. No claims to equity. No further rights to financial access. She didn't scream. She didn't plead. She just stared at the envelope like it might disappear if she blinked long enough. That night, when I came home, the house smelled of basil and roasted garlic. Celeste had made dinner, fettuccine, candles lit, napkins folded, like a last-ditch stage set for one more manipulation. I didn't sit. I didn't eat. I walked to the counter, pulled a small silver key from my pocket, and laid it beside a folded letter. She turned, smiling tightly. "What's this?" I met her gaze, steady as stone. "Good luck with the mortgage." Then I walked out. The air outside felt cleaner than it had in months. Behind me, the house remained lit. But it was no longer mine to fix, no longer a war I needed to fight. I had reclaimed everything she tried to erase, and I didn't need her apology to feel whole. It had been 3 weeks since I walked out of that house for good. 3 weeks since I handed over the key and let silence carry the weight of everything I could have screamed. The legal transfer was finalized without a hitch. My name now stood alone on the paperwork, but I no longer needed it. The house was listed, shown, and sold within 10 days. A young couple with a toddler had fallen in love with the garden. I didn't tell them I planted it. The day I returned with the realtor to grab the last box, an old set of journals and a ceramic bowl my mother gave me, was overcast. Fitting. The door creaked open and the scent hit me first. Not food, not flowers, just something empty. The kind of emptiness that hangs around after forced perfection loses its audience. I walked past the living room without pause, into the hallway, and turned left. My old room. I hadn't stepped foot inside since the day I found the real will. The walls were beige now, bland, flat, impersonal. Not a single photo, not even a pushpin left behind. The shelves were stripped. The closet doors open like a mouth mid-yawn. Nothing but space. "Not even a nail on the wall," I whispered. And yet I smiled. That room had never really been mine. Not when Celeste claimed it was temporary, or insisted I keep my boxes in the attic to make space for guests. There was no trace of me now. No erasure needed. I had outgrown it all. After dropping off the final box in my car, I took a detour on the drive home. Passed by Kira's school, the old park with the tilted swing, the bakery where we used to stop on Saturdays before Celeste said pastries weren't on brand. The neighborhood felt smaller somehow, or maybe I just stopped trying to fit into its mold. At the apartment, Kira met me at the door, cheeks flushed from running with the neighbor's kids. "Did you get the bowl?" she asked, bouncing slightly. I nodded. "And the blue journal, too." She grinned. "Can we hang the wind chimes now?" We stepped out to our tiny balcony, just big enough for 2 folding chairs and a tomato plant. She held the chimes while I found a hook along the railing. As the bells tinkled in the breeze, Kira looked up at me. "Mom? Are we happier now?" I turned to her, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "We're freer now." She seemed satisfied with that, resting her chin on the balcony rail to watch the chimes dance. Later that week, while picking up takeout, I noticed the bookstore on East Monroe had its windows papered with a sign, "Next chapter coming soon." They were repainting the trim a soft sea glass green. The door stood open, and I peeked inside to see ladders, fresh shelves, and someone unpacking boxes of novels. I stood there for a moment longer than necessary, the scent of fresh paint and new beginnings floating toward me. On the walk home, the air felt different, cooler, easier. Not because everything was perfect. It wasn't. Celeste's name still hovered in hushed conversations. At the school drop-off line, one mom avoided my eyes. Another offered a tight smile that said more than words. I didn't return the looks, didn't correct the whispers. Let the silence speak for me. Back at the apartment, I poured a cup of tea, pulled my journal from the shelf, and sat beside the window. I thought about the house, about every room I had helped restore, every wall I painted, every corner I quietly claimed and lost again. I didn't feel bitter. I felt rewritten, not erased. And this time, I held the pen. Sometimes healing doesn't come in loud victories. It comes in the quiet rooms we finally leave behind. I used to think walking away meant losing. Now I understand. It means choosing peace over chaos, truth over performance, and self-respect over pleasing people who never clapped for you. If there's one thing I hope you take from my story, It's this: silence is not weakness. Choosing yourself is not selfish. And when you reclaim your voice, even after years of being talked over, that's not rebellion, it's restoration. We all carry rooms inside us. Some we outgrow, some we rebuild, and some we finally learn to lock behind us, for good. But I'd love to hear from you. Have you ever had to walk away from a situation that no longer served you, even when no one else understood? Or maybe you're still in the middle of it, trying to find your way out. If this story touched you, comment 1 inch or tell me where you're watching from. I'd love to know who's listening. And if it didn't quite hit home, that's okay too. Let me know why and where you're tuning in from. Your voice matters here. If you felt even a flicker of something real in this video, subscribe to the channel, because these aren't just stories. They're reminders that you're not alone, and there's always another chapter waiting.